So we've made a lot of progress so far. You're now hopefully fairly familiar with the Xcode interface, with the main editing panel in the middle, the left bar usually showing our files, and then the right bar with our context menu and objects to drag in to our apps. And we've also got the options at the top to run the app and to change our layout, and also the logs area at the bottom that we've seen a little bit of as well. Before we go on and look at Swift in more detail in the next section, I wanted to put together a reasonably complete functioning app. And I came up with the idea of cat years, being an app that tells you if you put in your cat's age in human years, it will tell you your cat's age in cat years. So a fairly straightforward app, but it should allow us to go through the whole process of creating an app and having something that is reasonably functional. Now, if you've worked with Swift a little bit, possibly on my Apple Watch course, or done some programming in the past, you might want to attempt this yourself. But unlike all the projects in the rest of the course, I would recommend that if you haven't done any programming before, you follow along because you're not going to know some of the things that will be covered in the rest of this video. But I'll pause for a moment to allow you to pause the video and try it yourself if you want to. Okay, well, here we go. I'm going to start right within Xcode and I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to create a single view application as before, and I'm going to call it cat years. And everything else I'm going to leave the same. And then save it wherever you like. Click create, and Xcode will create all the files for you. Here we go. So remember, this is the main bit of information about the app. We don't really need to worry about anything here. We're going to go straight over to the main storyboard, which is the area where we actually build the look of our app. And all our app is going to do is invite the user to enter their cat's age, and then in the background it's going to multiply that age by 7 to get an impression of what their equivalent age is in cat years. So let's add in the important bits that we need. So as before, I'm going to switch to the double view. I'll get rid of the file options for the moment. And then here, I'm going to click automatic and main storyboard preview. Okay, and then we're just going to add a couple of labels. So one at the top. Now I'm going to manually position this for the moment. Later on in the course we'll learn much better ways for positioning, but for now we'll just position it so that it looks roughly central. And we'll put our title here. If you're a creative sort of a person, then you can play around with the font and color and everything like that. All I'm going to do is just make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and then I'm going to center the text in the box and just position it manually so that it's roughly central on my iPhone screen over here. That'll do. And then I'm going to bring in another label which will instruct the user what to do. You can see I'm going to give you a little taste of the auto layout here. If I position that underneath cat years, you see that blue dotted line appears, which enables me to center the label with the center of that label above, the cat years label. So that'll help with the alignment. And then I'll just stretch this out. And we'll have enter your cat's age in years. So a nice simple instruction for the user. There we go. And then let's just narrow that. Nice. Now we need a text field for the user to enter their cat's age in. So we can just put that straight underneath. And we're going to want a number here. So let's use the option that we saw earlier and change the default keyboard type to a number pad. Okay, we're almost there, but now we need a button. which the user will tap when they've finished entering their cat's age. And I'll just put find age there. You can, of course, change all of these as you like and have your layout look completely different to how I've got mine. Feel free to be as creative as you like. And almost finally, we'll have another label at the bottom, which for now we'll just leave as label, but we will stretch it out a bit because that's where we're going to put the answer. That's where we're going to put how many cat years the user is, or the user's cat is, I should say. And we'll just center that. And just to make sure it's nice and centered. There we go. Lovely. Now, just to spice things up a little bit, I've got a picture that I downloaded from the web of a cat, and I thought I'd bring it in here partly to make it look a little bit nicer and partly just to show you how to import an image into your app. So if you find any picture of a cat that you like, just Google Images, search for cat, and I found this very nice one here. So it can be any file type, but .png is the standard, and I'm just going to take that from my Finder window and drag it in right into the file area there. And then you can see we get this option for adding files, and I want you to leave everything exactly the same. We're not going to worry about groups or anything else there, and we do want to copy the item over, and that means that the file itself will be stored in the app files, which is just generally a good idea. So use finish, and then it will appear there. There it is, our cat.png. And then, unsurprisingly, if we search for image, we get an image view. So let's bring in our image view. There we go. We'll give ourselves a little bit more room. Very nice. So all we need to do to bring in our cat image is click the drop down for image and select the one that we just imported, so cat.png, and then I'm just going to stretch that out a little bit. There we go. Very nice. So that's how you bring an image into your app, and it does make the whole thing look a little bit more attractive. So that's our app layout. Now it's time for writing the little bit of code that we'll need to actually do the job. So let's switch our assistant editor from the preview to the viewcontroller.swift, which is where we run our code for our app. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few little challenges here as we're writing our code, because there are several things that we're going to do that we have done before and you should know how to do now. So the first thing is to link up this button to our code so that we have a function or a method which is run when that button is tapped. Go for it. Did you manage it? I hope so. All you needed to do was control click on the button and then drag over under the view controller class and then change connection to action, because this is an action that happens when something is done. And I'm going to call it find age this time, and everything else we can leave the same. Okay, if you managed to remember how to do that, congratulations. There are two more things that we need to connect up here, and they are the label and the text field here. So your next mini challenge is to connect those up and give them variable names over in our code. I hope you managed that. It's a very similar process. So we just right click and drag. I'm going to do it above this function here, but it really doesn't matter as long as it's outside of the view did load and the did receive memory warning areas. So this one, I'll just put age, and we leave it as an outlet because it's not an action this time. And then we'll do the same for, I think I'll call it result label. course, you can call these things whatever you like, but try and keep to this convention that the first word is small letters and then you capitalize every word or the beginning of every word after that. Okay, now let's build this app fairly slowly. So another mini challenge for you. Can you print to the logs when the button is tapped, whatever value this text field has, i.e. whatever the user has put in that field? I hope you managed it. It was a slightly cheeky challenge because we haven't actually done that before, but I think you may be able to figure it out, or at least you should have got close. We use print ln. We want to get the value of the text in the text field, so we just use age.text. There we go. Now let's just run that and make sure that everything is working, and this will at least tell us that we've linked everything up correctly and we've got a bit of code that's functioning. This is a good point to run our app because there's no complex code here, and I know that I haven't made any major errors because there aren't any error messages there, but something will happen, so I can at least check that my app is functioning. So we've got our number keyboard, that's great. So let's say my cat is 3, and I'm going to click Fine Age, and there we go, we've got a 3. Fantastic. If you get this warning, by the way, the can't find keyplane that supports type 4 for keyboard, don't worry about it. You can get rid of it by, in the simulator, going to hardware and then playing around with connecting hardware keyboard, etc. But I wouldn't worry, it's just a warning that the simulator is detecting another keyboard, which is your Mac keyboard, so it's not a problem. Okay, so our new challenge is to take the age that the user has entered and multiply it by 7. So there are a couple of slightly complicated steps in there. First of all, we need to create a variable that we're going to set equal to this value, age.text, that we can then multiply by 7 later on. So you may know how to do that, but I haven't shown you it before, so I'm just going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to create a variable called entered age because we need to be careful to keep the difference between the age that the user has entered and then the age in cat years. So this variable name should allow us to do that. And then we'll just set that equal to age.text. Okay, so far so good. Now we want to multiply that by 7. So you might think that we can just create another variable. We might want to call it cat years and set that equal to entered age multiplied by, and we use the shift 8, so the asterisk sign for multiply, just like in Excel, times 7. Now that makes sense, and especially if you've done some coding before in JavaScript, that would be absolutely fine, or PHP, that would be fine as well. But Swift is a very type sensitive language, and what I mean by that is this age.text is a variable with a type of string. It's a string, it's a collection of characters, and you can't multiply strings by numbers, because strings are designed for things like words, and obviously you can't multiply words by numbers. So what we need to do is convert our entered text to a number. And the function that we're going to use to do that is toInt. So int here is short for integer, which is a whole number. So that will convert our age.text to an integer. Now, however, we've still got an error. We're not quite there yet. If we look at the error, it actually gives us an option to fix the error. So let's do that and see if it works. Okay, so now we don't have an error, but we do have this strange exclamation mark here. What's that doing there? Now, this is something that we'll see a lot more of later on. The exclamation mark has the effect of what's known as unwrapping the variable. So what we've done here is convert the age.text to an integer. Now there's a perfectly reasonable chance that it won't be convertible. If the user has entered the letter T in there for some strange reason, then obviously you can't convert T to an integer. So this entered age will have no value. So if we try and multiply it by 7, we'll get an error. So what this exclamation mark does is essentially it's a way of the programmer saying to Xcode, don't worry, I'm absolutely sure that entered age will have a value. And then when you unwrap it, you're not going to get an error. Now that's quite a complicated idea, so if you weren't entirely clear with that, you might just want to flick back and listen to that explanation again. We will be seeing much more of these little exclamation marks, and indeed question marks, which do a similar thing later on. But I'll leave it at that for now. Now we're almost there. Of course, we don't want to display age.text at the moment. Let's just print out cat years. So we should find, if you're good at maths, when you put in a 3, you'll get 21 printed to the logs. So we'll just check that that works, and then we want to update the value of this label here. So let's enter out 3, and then find age, and we do indeed get 21. Fantastic. Of course, we don't really want 21 to appear down here. We want it to appear in the label. So another mini challenge for you. Can you update this line of code so instead of printing it to the logs, it updates the value of the label to have a value of 21? Okay, I hope you managed it. All we need to do is use result label dot text and set it equal to cat years. Now that will not work for the same reason that we had before, because cat years is an integer and this is a string. So if we just have a quick look at the error message, int is not convertible to string. So this is a string and this is an integer. So we can't do that explicitly. So I'm going to show you a way around that. Let's just hide the error message. What we actually want here anyway is to not just have 21, but to have your cat is 21 or something like that. So what we would do to have that is we'd set result label.text equal to your cat is, and then what we want is the variable or the value of the variable cat years to appear inside our string. And I'm going to show you how to do that. We use a backslash and then we put brackets round the variable itself. So that now works fine, and the result label.text is equal to your cat is, and then this will insert the value of cat years, the variable. And it doesn't have to have a particular string type in this case. We can import it no matter what the type is. So let's run that. We're almost there in finishing our app. You may have noticed a fairly major problem with our app. Think about a way that our app could go quite seriously wrong at the moment in its current form. And after we've just checked that everything is working okay, we'll fix that. So let's say my cat is 2 this time, and find age. Your cat is 14. Okay, excellent. So that works fine. I think we could make the user experience slightly clearer by saying your cat is 14 in cat years. And one small change I'd like to make is that I don't want the word label to appear there. So I'm just going to bring in the right menu bar and then click on label. And then over here, just get rid of the text. So that means the label is effectively going to be invisible until it has a value, which is what we want. Okay, so have you noticed the major problem with our app? Well, let's see what happens if the user, as they might well do, doesn't put anything in the box and clicks find age. Crash. We get a fatal error, unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional value. Okay, and all this comes in and everything goes horribly wrong. You'll probably see this many times in the course. Don't worry about it. It just means there's a mistake that needs to be dealt with. So what is the mistake? Let's just make everything nice and big and manageable. So remember when we put this exclamation mark after the entered age variable, that was our way of saying to Xcode, don't worry, we'd be absolutely sure that this has a value. Well, we're not absolutely sure is the short answer, because the user may well have entered nothing into the box, or the letter T, as I mentioned, or something that isn't convertible to a number. So how do we get around that? Well, what we do is we check whether or not entered age has a value before we do any of this. And we can do that by saying if entered age is not equal to, so this exclamation mark and an equal sign means not equal to, and then we use nil, nil being our shortcode for empty, essentially. So if entered age is not equal to nil, i.e. if entered age has a value, then do all this. And we normally just move those lines in a little so that the code is easier to read. So now if we run our app, what should happen if the user has entered nothing into the box or has entered a word or something into the box? Well, what should happen is absolutely nothing, but at least we won't get a crash, and a crash is what we really want to avoid. So let's just give it a try. If we put find age, nothing happens. Okay, fantastic. One last thing I'd like to add is I don't really like the fact that it does nothing. I'd quite like it to give the user a message. So let's do that here. So this was an if statement, which again we're going to see a lot more of in the next chapter when we look at Swift in more detail. But with if statements, you can say if something is true, then do this, else do this. So what will happen is that this chunk of code will run if entered age is not equal to nil. So all we want to put in there is an update of the label to something like, please enter a whole number. So mini challenge for you. Can you do that? I hope you managed it. All we need to do is set result label.text equal to, and I'll put something like, please enter a number in the box. Okay. So now when we run our app, we'll get an error message for the user if they don't enter a number into the box, which is a much better experience than just doing nothing. So find age, there we go. So I do need to just adjust the width of that box because it's not wide enough. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to do on your machine. And just to check, if my cat is, for example, 4, and I click find age, then your cat is 28 in cat years. Fantastic. So congratulations, you've created your first reasonably useful iOS app. And you've also learnt a lot about how Xcode fits together, and you've even written some reasonably advanced Swift code here and looking at complicated things like if statements and unwrapping variables. Now in the next section we're going to be looking at Swift in a lot more detail using a feature called Swift Playgrounds, which is built into Xcode. I hope you're excited about it, and I look forward to seeing you there.